My colleagues raised the question, are we running a homeless shelter or a prison? We can't figure it out at this point.
Had you guys had experienced problems with like crime or anything that would necessitate or maybe cause people to want to have a barbed wire fence?
Not on that level. Now, keep in mind, there's always an increase of criminal activity around a homeless shelter.
Sure.
But not because the homeless shelter is there, but because the people are already there. In Madison County, we are right by the public library. We are right by the district court. We are right by all downtown and public service utilities. So regardless if there's a shelter there will be homeless and there will be increased crime. The homeless shelter actually minimizes that crime element, right? Because at least people are safe and they're in a safe place and they have safer resources.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm your host, David Fromm. All right, picture this. You've had a long day, you're dead tired, and you know exactly where you're headed when your head finally hits the pillow. Your bed. No guessing, no wondering, no stress about where you'll sleep tonight. But, not everyone has that peace of mind. There are folks out there who work one, sometimes two jobs, doing everything right and still can't afford a place to live. That's where shelters step in. They give people that one night of rest where they don't have to worry about where they'll lay their head. Now, here's something that is frustrating. In one town in Kentucky, those very shelters that give people that peace of mind are now the ones losing sleep, not because of a lack of donations, but because of what the city is doing. You see, it involves zoning laws, which started out a century ago as a way to separate businesses and homes, which kind of makes sense. But over time, some of these zoning laws have gone too far. And now this Kentucky town has taken it to a whole new level. They've started applying zoning rules that affect these homeless shelters. One proposed example, a shelter might be required to put up barbed wire fencing. Yeah, barbed wire, like they're running a prison instead of trying to help people get back on their feet. And it doesn't stop there. That's what we're going to talk to our guest about right now. I want to welcome back to the podcast Michael Frazier, who's a regional field manager for Americans for Prosperity Kentucky and is involved in one of these shelters. Michael, welcome.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here with you today.
Yeah, well, we're thrilled to have you back. This sounds super frustrating, by the way. This, what the government, how the government is kind of inserting themselves here. So
it is our volunteer shelter that is one of the only regional shelters that actually has the capacity to house men and women and families in Central Kentucky. And the problem with this is that we have, with our limited capability, not just regionally, we are one of the few shelters in the state that actually has that ability. So to have our city to come in, especially just a few months before winter shelter is needed, when the temperatures are the coldest and when people are in need at the greatest, to say that, they may use city zoning to dispel overnight shelters because poverty isn't pretty and people don't want to deal with it. It's truly heartbreaking.
Well, so maybe give kind of set up the background here for our listeners. Like what area of Kentucky are you in? And maybe characterize the homeless problem in Kentucky. I mean, look, I've traveled a lot of states, and unfortunately, homelessness just seems to be, a rampant problem in a lot of places. I'm sure Kentucky's no different. So maybe tell us about like what homelessness looks like in Kentucky and like where the shelter and you're located.
Right. So in Kentucky, we're in Richmond, Kentucky, which is about 20 minutes south of Lexington. So we're right dead in the center of Kentucky. A lot of people would kind of see us as a suburb of Lexington. And so we are regionally coordinated in the central Kentucky area. Homelessness is at an all-time peak in all states, but particularly here in central Kentucky, due to the amount of churches we have, the amount of generosity we have, states have actually flooded central Kentucky with their homeless because we will actually step up to do something with their homeless. So, for instance, at Madison Home, which is the homeless shelter that I'm chairman of, I actually get calls all the way I get calls all the way from Indiana, Illinois, Tennessee, Virginia, and then at some points New York, asking if they bus their homeless to us, would we take them?
Wow.
Because there's no room. There's no room. And of course, I also get calls interstate, all the way from Paducah to Pikeville. I even had a call just a few weeks ago of somebody dropped off at a rest area in Slade, Kentucky, and asked if I would come pick them up and shelter them. Slade is an hour and a half away from us.
So what kind of goes into the homeless numbers? I mean, we can see different rates and different numbers. How does somebody get characterized as being homeless?
Well, there are two different standards. One is the colloquial standard, meaning that it's what we consider as sheltered to be homeless. These are individuals that doesn't have a roof over their heads, or sleep on their couches, or sleep on friends' couches, sleep in their cars. They have temporary lodging, or they have absolutely no place to sleep at all. And then you have the state's number, which is called the K count, which means you have no shelter whatsoever. However, that number disregards if you are going couch to couch or sleep out on somebody else's floor. So we do have two different discrepancies of what it means to be homeless. But here, it's usually somebody. People think that if you're homeless, that you're just on drugs. And of course, here in Kentucky, we're not shy to the opiate crisis, right?
Sure.
But really, when we look not only statistically, and we have quantified this in our homeless population through the K count and the official state count, is that poverty is the number one reason. These are often people who are working 2 to 3 jobs. These are people who are trying to afford daycare and choosing between essentially their car, which is their way that they can get to work and try to get out of poverty, versus trying to buy an apartment in a housing shortage where people can't afford their own apartment. So that's the type of homeless demographic that we have, and sort of the discrepancies within the two counts.
So you're, like you mentioned, you're the chair of a homeless shelter. How'd you get started in that? And tell me, what does your shelter offer compared to others?
Sure. So we actually got started in, it almost sounds like a bad joke that I'm a gay Catholic, my friend's Hindu, another one's Muslim, another one's Baptist, and we all came together and said, we're tired of homelessness. Let's just do something about it. We're almost a bad joke just coming out.
It is. We're going to make a joke on the After Hours show somehow.
we're just missing a rabbi, and we do have a rabbi that comes volunteers. So nice. We were sitting around, and my friend's dad, who's a heart surgeon here in Madison County in Richmond, we were talking about that. Frankly, no one was stepping up to house the homeless, and everybody was seeing this as such a barrier, but no one was actually stepping up to meet those barriers. And so my friend's dad, which is maybe 4 foot tall, small as he could be, he used to be a medvac over in Pakistan, but before he was chased out by the Taliban. I mean, just an incredible story on his own. And he comes around the corner and he calls me the Michael. The Michael, will you go find building? Stop fussing, find building. And I went, well, Dr. Assad, are you sure? And he went, yes, stop fussing, go do it. And so that's what we did. We came together and we found a building, and we sent out an email online to the other churches in Madison County and asked, if we find this building, who's going to step up? Who will step up and help the homeless? And sure enough, our core group that runs Madison Home, which is a 501c3 of individual churches coming together, our core group has 7 individuals, which is the bad joke that I mentioned. And then we have a total of 70 churches that have stepped up, and we do rotations. Those are the individuals offering meals. And in the 158 days that we are open, during winter, because we're only open from December to March for overnight stays, we have housed over 2,000 individuals. When we feed 4,000 people a month, and that's just in lunch and dinner alone. We have clothed over 400, and we have found over 200 new homes, either through helping them with informs, with assistant living, within temporary stays. We have done, and we do that. And we're also one of the few shelters that offer showering resources, laundry services. So, again, a lot of these people are they're down on their luck.
Yeah.
And we're just coming together to make sure that they have the resources they need to get back on their luck.
Well, it strikes me too that you talk about laundry and showering services. I mean, these are such basic things. And, even if somebody is suffering from addiction or something like that, I mean, I know that is a factor at times, but, people need dignity. We talk about that as a company, actually, like, in a lot of the work that we do is, how do we either restore or really preserve dignity for folks? And I think, letting someone get clean and, have clean clothes and certainly get rest is, a core way of giving them a modicum of dignity that they can then hopefully go and build upon. But I'm glad you're offering those to the folks you need to serve.
And we have to teach dignity at an early stage, and also equal worth as well. This time last year, of course, being around the Thanksgiving holiday, one of the hardest things I ever dealt with was having 2 high schoolers dropped off at the shelter, being told that their parents don't want them anymore.
Oh my!
And one came from Lincoln County, which is over 2 hours away. These 2 kids were aged out of foster care, and she came to me, and she only had a hoodie, a bra, sweatpants, and going through that process of, do you need clean underwear? Asking questions of, how can we ensure that you have that basic level of, when we think of dignity, we think of just how we treat each other, but also what we need ourselves, and being able to teach her how to express what she needed to have dignity for herself. That was a hard thing to go through. And then going into the apparatus of, well, you're here. We're going to have a good Thanksgiving together. Let's talk about school on Monday. And I'm happy to say that a year later, they did graduate from Madison Central High School. And one of them just had their first child. One of them was pregnant when they were dropped off to us, kept the child, has their own apartment, has a job, and looking at post-secondary education, and one's looking at the Army.
Oh, wow.
Being able to install that, getting back to your point, David, getting back and teaching what equal dignity sets that foundation for people to really prosper.
Yeah, what a wonderful story. And I'm sure you got a lot more of those.
I'm very proud of those kids. Very, very, very proud of those kids.
Oh. Well, let's start with something that is less uplifting: zoning laws. So when you moved in and opened up, what did the zoning laws look like?
So the zoning laws were very much distinguished between residential and just commercial status. There was nothing for homeless shelters. There is no special characteristics, special permits, special license, or special zoning for homeless shelters. And my involvement with Madison Home, we really started incorporating as a shelter was 2 years ago. And our theory is that we have been able to keep the homeless away from businesses. We've been able to keep them away from the streets. And frankly, we have reduced financial impact on the city by the homeless because we keep them fed, we keep them clothed, we keep them healthy, and we try to ensure that they don't cause havoc that does a financial uptick for businesses in the city, right? Well, fast forward to now is that there are multiple people trying to start shelters in Madison County, and that's great because there's plenty there's plenty of poverty to go around, and that's not great, right? But it tells the truth that we need more. There's only so much services that Madison Home can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's obviously caused issues with our city. There's a state law that first says that if you're a homeless shelter, you do have to get permission from the city to operate. Well, we've done that at Madison Home. We think that's a violation of private property rights. If we get approval, we get approval from a business to operate as a business, and we're doing it in a commercial zoning, then if we're approved, go away. But other people have brought up other places. And so that has led to complaints, particularly by the city. And we can't figure out if residential people are complaining, what has perspired these complaints with the city, or precipitated these complaints from the city. It's just, we know it's the city. And I was actually at a training for Americans for Prosperity. I've been working with the city. I've been trying to figure out, how do we protect private property rights? How do we ensure that we don't create market-based monopolies through zoning? And I go to DC for a training at our headquarters that stand together. And I get a note saying, well, there's a surprise meeting by city and zoning, and they want to regulate overnight shelters. Oh, hold up. There's a regulation for overnight shelters? I said, what about day shelters? What about day centers? What about resource hubs for the homeless? Why are we doing a zoning policy that only talks about zoning for overnight shelters? And I started calling around, and keep in mind, this was late at night. This was after an all-day training. And somebody that I talked to from the city made it clear that, well, we need to consider ourselves lucky because, if we're not zoned out to agriculture, which means it's in the middle of nowhere. The reason why our homeless shelters are in cities is because that's where it's most accessible for those who are homeless. Mm-hmm. Putting us in the middle of nowhere in agriculture zoning, which is farming, while it attempts to put homelessness out of sight and out of mind, all it's going to do is waste our resources where nobody's going to use us, right? Mm-hmm. But one of the requirements is that they said, well, if we do allow you in the city, we're going to require you to make a 10-foot. It ranged between 10 feet and 15 feet, a 15-foot fence, and then put barbed wire around it. And one of my colleagues raised the question, are we running a homeless shelter or a prison? We can't figure it out at this point.
Had you guys had experienced problems with like crime or anything that would necessitate or maybe cause people to want to have a barbed wire fence?
Not on that level. Now, keep in mind, there's always an increase of criminal activity around a homeless shelter, sure, but not because the homeless shelter is there, but because the people are already there. In Madison County, we are right by the public library. We are right by the district court. We are right by all downtown and public service utilities. So regardless if there's a shelter there will be homeless and there will be increased crime. The homeless shelter actually minimizes that crime element, right? Because at least people are safe and they're in a safe place and they have safer resources. Additionally, we prevent gang activity. So the homeless is actually targeted by gang activity to sell particularly drugs. Having a homeless shelter there actually diminishes the ability for gangs to actually take hold of the homeless, try to entrap them and force them to sell drugs. And we've heard many stories, and we've had numerous stories, not at our shelter, but at other shelters where, there is quite a bit of evidence to show that. So no, we haven't had any reports other than a usual, people don't like the fact that they see homeless people in front of our shelter, but they're on our property, they're on our land, and one would rather see them on our land than seeing them scattered out in the city and causing havoc.
Right.
Mm-hmm. but nothing to cause a 10-foot fence. And if the 10-foot fence is there, the homeless isn't going to come. They're just going to go somewhere else.
So basically, the city has been changing their stance with regard to zoning laws, and it's making it much harder for you all to operate potentially. And are other shelters dealing with the same reality?
Yes. So one shelter here actually got cited with a provisional use violation for operating as a shelter because the county did not like the fact that their property was being used as a homeless shelter. Another homeless shelter that actually operates in 2 houses. One of my friends has been fortunate to buy 2 houses and is using it to house the homeless, is threatened to be shut down by the zoning policy. Mm-hmm. And then for us, with our occupational use license and our zoning policy, yes, we are in a dire position ourselves where we are very close to not have a homeless solution here in Madison County whatsoever. In fact, all of our shelters are threatened to be shut down.
And so how are you guys kind of challenging this and fighting back against these, zoning moves by the city?
Well, I'm happy to say that by the things that's been taught to me by Americans for Prosperity and the free market, when we looked at the overnight shelters policy and zoning ordinance, and looking at how the proposed policy was a top-down solution that created market interference, particularly when it comes to overnight shelters and day centers. Just by banning overnight centers would have inundated the day centers to the point it would have either capsized resources available, or it would have completely just marked out homeless resources altogether. Approaching this from the free market, I'm happy to say that just recently the city pulled the policy and said, let's revisit this, because clearly we are going to interfere with the market and it's going to have a dire impact. And I have recently been appointed to a task force to revisit the zoning policies. So by looking at this from a bottom-up solution and by trying to give people equal dignity and through free market ideas, the city has completely put a pause on their plans and said, let's bring this back from a free market standpoint. So I'm very excited. This story doesn't have a sad ending, not yet, and hopefully not yet. It has an exciting thrust into the free market, which I'm very excited to see.
Well, I'm excited to hear your story and that there's some positive progress there. Yeah. Sometimes there's well-meaning people who try to enact things and use government to do things that in the end really are really not beneficial and are negative. And, unfortunately we see from all sides of the aisle, all different type of ideological bents, people sometimes like to use the power that they have in front of them or in hand to kind of impose a top-down solution. And, right. I think we agree that that's not the way to go. So I applaud you for I applaud you for, like, you guys stepping up and creating the shelter to address a need in your community. I mean, that is, talk about a great bottom-up solution to go and try to address the needs of your community. That's inspiring. That's a great thing to do. I mean, heck, if you didn't even work for Americans for Prosperity, I'd be celebrating that no matter what. But I'm proud that you're on our team with AFP also.
Yeah. Well, I'm very proud of my board and all the churches and community leaders. I mean, truly, if you want to talk about a bottom-up solution, it's literally all of us coming together and trying to serve the homeless and get people back on their feet, giving them equal dignity, equal worth, and some inspiration and just kindness and fellowship, and saying, we're here, and you do have a home at Madison Home.
Well, Michael, you keep going and fighting the good fight, man. I really appreciate you joining us and kind of keeping us updated on what's going on there with the shelter and the zoning fight.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on, and looking forward to keeping you apprised to what the city of Richmond plans on doing next.
Well, folks, if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.